The doctor went pale when he saw my blood work. His hand started shaking. Then he leaned closer and whispered, "You need to leave your husband, today." That was the moment I realized my marriage wasn't just broken, it was dangerous. I sat there quietly, nodding, acting confused. Inside, something cold woke up. For 10 years I had been the calm one, the patient wife, the woman who never argued, never questioned, never complained. People said I was lucky. They said my husband was charming, successful, respected. No one saw how tired I was. No one noticed how I kept getting sick slowly. The doctor closed the door and spoke in a low voice. "These levels don't happen naturally," he said. "Someone has been poisoning you. Not enough to kill you quickly, just enough to weaken you." I didn't cry, I didn't gasp. I just stared at the wall, thinking about the dinners my husband cooked with a smile. The tea he insisted I drink every night. The way he always said, "You're so fragile." The doctor begged me to leave quietly. He said if I confronted him, I might not survive. He said this wasn't about love anymore. It was about control. That night I went home like nothing had changed. I kissed my husband on the cheek. I thanked him for dinner. I drank the tea just enough to pretend. And then I started listening. I noticed things I had ignored for years. The locked drawer in his study. The phone calls he took in another room. The life insurance policy I never remembered signing. I stopped being the weak wife. I became patient, invisible, careful. I replaced the tea with something else, not poison, something better. Something that would keep me alive long enough to learn the truth. One night I overheard him laughing on the phone. He said my name. Then he said, "She doesn't suspect a thing." I stood in the hallway, completely still. My heart calm, my hands steady. Because now I knew exactly what game he was playing. And I had finally learned how to play it better. I didn't confront him. Not that night, not the next morning either. Instead I became softer. I laughed more, I thanked him more often. I told him I was feeling better. That scared him. Men like him don't panic when you're weak. They panic when you stop being predictable. I started keeping a journal, but not on paper. In my head, times, patterns, words he used when he thought no one was listening. Every night at exactly 9:40 he locked his study. Every Thursday he received a call and stepped outside. Every month, money moved from our joint account to somewhere I didn't recognize. I pretended to sleep early, I slowed my breathing. I learned his footsteps. One night he forgot to lock the drawer. Inside were printed emails, cold, professional conversations with someone who called him sir. They discussed dosages, timing, how long the human body could survive without raising suspicion. My name appeared like a medical experiment. Still, I didn't cry. Crying wastes oxygen, and I needed my mind sharp. I took pictures, one by one, then I placed everything back exactly as it was. The next day I visited the doctor again secretly. He didn't ask why I hadn't left. He just looked relieved that I was still alive. He adjusted my treatment, taught me how to counteract small amounts, told me something that changed everything. "You're not the first," he said. "There were others. Women who got sick, women who divorced suddenly, women who disappeared from their husbands' lives quietly. No police reports, no funerals, just silence." I went home and cooked dinner for the first time in years. My husband watched me like I was a stranger. "You shouldn't strain yourself," I smiled. "I'm stronger than you think." That night he didn't drink the tea. That was when I knew he was suspicious. So I gave him something else, attention. I asked about his day, I touched his arm, I made him feel safe. People like him relax when they think they're winning. Weeks passed. My body grew stronger, his patience grew thinner. He started checking my cup before I drank, started asking where I'd been, started calling me at random hours. Control was slipping. One evening he came home late, too late. I smelled alcohol and confidence. The kind that comes from thinking you've already won. He sat across from me and said, "You know, if you ever left me, you wouldn't survive on your own." I looked at him calmly. "I know." He smiled. That smile used to terrify me. Now it just confirmed things. That night I followed him. For the first time in 10 years I left the house after midnight. I kept my distance, stayed in shadows. He met someone in a quiet parking lot. A woman in a white coat. I recorded everything. Their conversation, their laughter. She said, "Your wife is impressive. She's lasted longer than the others." My heart didn't race, it settled. I finally understood. I wasn't meant to die quickly. I was meant to fade. To become weak, dependent, grateful. A living warning. When he returned home, I was already in bed. He kissed my forehead and whispered, "Good girl." I almost laughed. The next day I made a decision. I filed nothing. I packed nothing. I started preparing something far more precise. I contacted an old friend, someone my husband never liked because he said he was too curious. I shared nothing emotional, only facts. I began moving money, small amounts, invisible amounts. I changed my routine again, unpredictable, alive. One afternoon my husband stood in the doorway and said, "You've changed." I looked him in the eyes. "So have you." That night he tried to speed things up. The tea tasted different, stronger. I poured it down the sink when he wasn't looking. Later I woke up to him standing over me, just standing, watching me breathe. Neither of us spoke. In that silence something passed between us, he knew. Not everything, but enough. The next morning I received a message on a phone I didn't recognize, a single line. "If you love your life, stop digging." I deleted it. Then I smiled. Because now it wasn't just about survival, it was about exposure, about patience, about letting someone believe they were in control, right up until the moment they realized they never were. That night, I sat across from my husband at dinner. He raised his glass. To us, he said. I raised mine too. And for the first time he was the one who looked nervous. I didn't drink from the glass, neither did he. We just sat there, the quiet stretching between us like a wire pulled too tight, the kind that snaps without warning. You seem distant, he said finally. I'm tired, I replied. That wasn't a lie. Living while pretending to die is exhausting. He watched every movement I made after that, the way I held my fork, the way I swallowed, the way I breathed. Fear had entered his routine. And fear makes people careless. 2 days later, he made a mistake. He used my name on the phone, not at my wife, my full name. People only do that when they're talking business. I stood at the top of the stairs, invisible in the dark, listening. I need it done soon, he said. She's not declining fast enough. A pause. No, I don't care how. Just make it look natural. My hands didn't shake. That surprised me. What surprised me more was how calm my mind felt, like it had been waiting for this moment for years. The next morning, I went out early. I left my phone at home on purpose. I needed him to think I was careless. I met the old friend again. This time, I gave him everything: photos, medical reports. He didn't interrupt, didn't react. When I finished, he said something that stayed with me. People like him don't stop, he said. They escalate. That night, my husband cooked. That alone was a message. He moved slowly, deliberately. Every action measured. I watched from the doorway, smiling like a grateful wife. He served the food himself, sat across from me, waited. I ate, carefully. Only what I had prepared my body to handle. Halfway through the meal, he relaxed. That's when I spoke. Do you ever feel guilty? I asked softly. He froze. About what? He said. About control, I replied. About deciding how much someone else deserves to live. The room changed, not violently, quietly. Like air being pulled out. He studied my face, searching for weakness. He didn't find it. You're imagining things, he said. I used to, I answered. Not anymore. He laughed too loudly. That night, I slept with the door locked. That had never happened before. At 30:17 a.m., someone tried the handle. Not aggressively testing. I didn't move. At 30:19, the next day, he apologized. Flowers, breakfast, concern, classic reset behavior. I accepted everything. Then I did something new. I left. Not permanently, just long enough to scare him. I stayed with someone he didn't know about. I turned off all tracking. I let silence do the work. 3 days passed. On the 4th, I returned home. The house felt different, rushed, disturbed. The study door was open. That was new. Inside, documents were missing, drawers rearranged. He was cleaning, preparing. That night, he didn't pretend anymore. You should stop involving other people, he said casually, as if discussing the weather. Why? Because accidents happen, he replied. There it was. The threat clear, unmasked. I nodded slowly. You're right, I said. They do. That answer confused him. Good. From that moment on, the house became a battlefield of patience. He tried to isolate me again. I countered by being visible. He tried to monitor my body. I monitored his behavior. He tried to rush. I slowed everything down. One afternoon, a package arrived, no return address. Inside was a single syringe. Empty. Attached to it was a notie. You're not as careful as you think. I placed it exactly where he would find it, on his desk, centered. That night, he didn't sleep. Neither did I. At dawn, he stood in the kitchen and said, "Who have you been talking to?" I took my time answering. "The wrong people," I said. His jaw tightened. Later that day, my doctor called. He was scared. "They came asking questions," he whispered. "About you." I thanked him. Then I hung up. This was moving faster now. Too fast. That evening, I found my wedding ring on the table. Beside it was a printed document, divorce papers. Unsigned. He was trying to regain control through legality, through fear. I picked them up, read them slowly, and placed them back. "I'll think about it," I said. That night I prepared for something else. Not escape, confrontation. But not yet. At 11:42 p.m. the power went out. Not the whole neighborhood, just our house. I stood in the hallway, listening to the generator fail to kick in. Footsteps slow, intentional. A silhouette appeared at the end of the corridor. He spoke from the dark. "You should have listened to the doctor," he said calmly. My heart finally beat faster, not from clarity. Because in that moment, I understood something completely. This wasn't about killing me anymore. It was about stopping me from talking, from surviving. I took a step back into the room. The door behind me closed softly. And for the first time since this began, I didn't know which one of us was about to lose control. The darkness wrapped around the house like a held breath. I didn't scream. I didn't run. People think fear makes noise. Real fear makes you quiet. I said into the dark. His footsteps stopped. Silence. That silence told me everything he hadn't expected. Calm. "You shouldn't be standing," he replied. "You're still weak." I smiled, though he couldn't see it. "That's what you needed me to believe." I moved slowly, carefully, letting my fingers trace the wall until I felt the edge of the dresser. I knew this room. I had memorized every inch of it during nights I pretended to sleep. He took a step closer. "You've ruined everything," he said. His voice wasn't angry, it was disappointed, as if I had failed a test. I thought of all the times I had apologized for things I didn't do. All the times I had thanked him for not hurting me more. I didn't ruin anything, I said. I exposed it. He laughed quietly. You think exposure matters? People disappear every day. The power flickered for half a second, long enough for me to see his face, not rage, not panic, calculation. He had planned this. I backed toward the window. He noticed. Don't, he warned. I'm not going, I replied. I'm waiting. That made him pause. Waiting was my strength now. A sound broke the tension, a distant car engine outside, then another. Not police sirens, just presence. He heard it too, his head tilted slightly. What did you do? He asked. I didn't answer. Instead, I asked, do you remember the first time I got sick? He scoffed. Why does that matter? Because that was the first time you underestimated me, I said. He stepped closer again, impatience breaking through control. You think you're smarter than me? He said. No. I answered honestly. I think I survived you. His breathing changed. Faster now. That's when I saw it, the outline of something in his hand. Not a gun, smaller, medical, precise. You should lie down, he said. This will be easier. For who? I wondered. Glass pressed into my spine, the window. Below us darkness. Above us silence. You know, I said softly. There's something you never asked. What? He snapped. Why I stayed. That unsettled him. People like him believe fear is the only glue. I stayed, I continued, 'cause leaving too early would have protected you. The engine sounds outside stopped. Doors closed, voices low, distant, controlled. His eyes shifted toward the hallway. You involved people, he said slowly, his tone sharpened. You broke the rules. There were never rules, I replied. Only your assumptions, he lunged. Not wildly, efficiently. I moved sideways, letting him miss by inches. The object in his hand clattered to the floor. The sound echoed like a gunshot. He froze. I kicked it away without looking. You should have ended it when you had the chance, he said through clenched teeth. I gave you years. I reply, you used them. A knock came from the front door, firm, official. He laughed suddenly. A short, bitter sound. You think they'll save you? He asked. You think the truth matters more than reputation? The knocking came again, louder. I felt my hands tremble for the first time, not from fear, but from the weight of how close this was. I think, I said carefully, that you forgot something. What? He said. That I'm still alive. He stared at me, really stared, and in his eyes I saw it, not hatred, regret, not for hurting me, for failing. He turned toward the door. I didn't stop him. Because the moment he reached the hallway, someone spoke from the darkness behind him. Sir, a calm voice said, put your hands where we can see them. His shoulders stiffened. He glanced back at me, and in that look was a promise. This wasn't over, not for him, not for me. The house filled with light as flashlights cut through the dark. I stayed where I was, pressed against the window, heart pounding. They didn't touch me yet, they were focused on him. Questions, commands, procedure. As they led him past me, he leaned close enough for me to hear his whisper. You think this is winning, he said. You have no idea what comes next. I met his eyes. For the first time, he didn't look in control. He looked exposed. They took him outside, the door closed. The house went quiet again. Too quiet. I slid down to the floor, knees shaking, body finally admitting what it had been holding back. My phone buzzed a message. Unknown number, one sentence, so you did the right thing. Now be ready. I stared at the screen, because deep down, I knew something terrible and undeniable. This wasn't the end of the story. It was the moment where it stopped being private, and became dangerous for everyone involved. They didn't let me sleep that night. Not because they didn't want to, but because sleep wouldn't come. The house was suddenly full of strangers, uniforms, voices that spoke in codes and procedures, men and women who looked at me with curiosity, not sympathy. I wrapped a blanket around my shoulders and sat on the edge of the couch, answering questions with a calm that surprised even me. How long? When did you suspect? Why didn't you leave? I gave them facts, only facts. Emotion confuses timelines, and timelines were everything now. At dawn they finally let not all of them. One stayed behind plain clothes, no badge in sight, sharp eyes. You're very composed, he said, watching me closely. I learned, I replied. He nodded slowly, as if that explained more than I realized. Before leaving, he said something that felt heavier than a warning. People like your husband rarely work alone. The front door closed behind him. But this time, it wasn't peaceful. It felt watched. I showered for a long time, letting the water run until my skin burned. I scrubbed until I could almost believe I was washing years off me. When I came out, my phone was ringing. The doctor. They released him, he said without greeting. I froze. Released, I repeated. Temporarily, he added quickly. No charges yet. They say they need more evidence. My stomach tightened. They always, he said. Be careful. The call ended. I stood there, dripping water onto the floor, suddenly aware of how exposed I was. No poison, no lies, just me. By noon, the news had already started whispering. Not about attempted murder, a domestic medical concern. My husband's version. He had always been good at controlling narratives. I didn't go outside. Instead, I opened the study again. This time, I didn't put things back. I searched thoroughly. Hidden compartments, encrypted drives, documents that connected names I didn't recognize. There were initials everywhere. Accounts, transactions, patterns. This wasn't just a marriage, it was infrastructure. That afternoon, my phone buzzed again. A blocked number. I didn't answer. A message followed. You made a mess. I stared at it, pulse steady. Another message appeared seconds later. Meet us, or it gets cleaned up. No location, no time, just expectation. I sat down slowly. This was the escalation my friend had warned me about. When control fails quietly, it gets louder. At sunset, there was a knock at the door. Not police, 2 people. A man and a woman. Well-dressed, polite. May we come in? The woman asked with a calm smile. I stepped aside. They didn't look dangerous. That was the point. We represent people who prefer privacy. The man said once seated, and solutions. I don't have anything to offer, I replied. The woman tilted her head slightly. You have silence, she said. And survival. They explained it carefully, no threats, no raised voices. Just implications. They could make this disappear. The charges, the investigations. In return, I would leave, quietly, immediately, change my name, my city, my life. And if I refuse, I asked. They exchanged a look. Then you become a liability, the man said. I nodded, absorbing every word. I need time, I said. They stood. You have until tomorrow, the woman replied. After that, choices will be made for you. When the door closed, I locked it and leaned against it, heart pounding. Not from fear, from rage. I called my friend. He listened. Then he said, they're nervous. That surprised me. Why? I asked. Because you didn't disappear when you were supposed to, he replied. And because you're still breathing. That night, I packed a bag. Not to run, to prepare. I backed up files, sent copies to places I hoped I wouldn't need. I wrote nothing down. I slept lightly, dressed ready. At 6:12 a.m. my phone rang. No number, I answered. A familiar voice filled the line. Calm, controlled. My husband. They think you're strong now, he said. You tried to poison me. I replied evenly. Yes, he said. And you lived. That changes things. I closed my eyes. This ends when you stop, I said. He laughed softly. That's not how this works, he replied. You've already crossed the line. The call ended. Moments later, my doorbell rang. I didn't move. The bell rang again. Then my phone buzzed with a message. Last chance. I stood in the hallway, bag at my feet, phone in my hand. Outside that door were people who wanted silence. Inside my pocket were truths that could destroy more than one life. I realized then that survival had carried me this far. But choice would decide what came next. I took a breath and reached for the door. The door opened slowly. I didn't step back. I didn't step forward. 2 men stood outside this time. Different faces, same posture. They looked past me, already assessing the space, the exits, the risks. Pack light, one of them said. You won't need most of this. I glanced down at the bag by my feet, then back at them. I'm not going anywhere yet, I replied. The man on the left smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. That's not your decision anymore. I let the silence stretch. People underestimate silence. They rush to fill it. They reveal things. I said calmly, what happens when too many people know the same secret? The smile faded slightly. It stops being a secret. I continued, becomes a liability. The other man shifted his weight. We're trying to help you, he said. You're standing in the middle of something much bigger than your marriage. I know, I replied. That's why I'm still standing. They exchanged a look. Behind them, a car idled at the curb, engine run open. An invitation or a warning. My phone vibrated in my pocket. Once, twice I didn't look. You have evidence, the first man said. We know that? That was new. And yet, I said, you're here in person. Another pause. That told me everything. If they were confident, they wouldn't be knocking, they'd already be gone. I need 10 minutes, I said, to make a call. The second man frowned. The first hesitated. Finally he nodded. I stepped back inside and closed the door. I locked it, then I ran, not out. Upstairs, the study. I opened the hidden compartment one last time and pulled out a drive no one else knew about. The one I hadn't shared. The one I'd kept for leverage. My phone buzzed again. This time I answered. You don't have much time, my friend said immediately. They're pressuring everyone. They're already here, I replied. Silence. Then, quietly, then it started. What started? I asked. The part where they stopped pretending. He said. A loud knock echoed through the house. Harder this time. 5 minutes are up. A voice called. I hung up, heart steady, mind clear. I sent one message. No explanation, no emotion. Just coordinates. Then I went back downstairs. I opened the door. They looked relieved. That bothered me. I'll go, I said. But not like this. The first man frowned. What does that mean? It means, I said, stepping outside. You don't get to decide how quietly I disappear. The air felt heavy. Get in the car, the second man snapped. I didn't move. Instead, I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone. I sent copies, I said calmly. If anything happens to me, everything goes public. That was a lie mostly. The man closest to me grabbed my wrist. Fast, professional, I didn't resist. I leaned in and whispered, check your phone. He hesitated. Sirens cut through the air. Not close, not far. Approaching, all 3 of them froze. The men stepped back instinctively. Did you call them? One hissed. No, I said. I invited them. The sirens passed. Not stopping here. The relief on their faces was immediate. Then realization. You're bluffing, the first man said. I smile, am I? Before anyone could move, a different car pulled up behind theirs. Unmarked, windows tinted. A door opened. A familiar plain-clothed figure stepped out, the one who had stayed behind that morning. He looked at me first. then at them. Interesting gathering, he said mildly. No one spoke. Mind telling me, he continued, why people who don't officially exist are standing on the porch of a woman connected to an active investigation. The silence turned sharp. The first man recovered quickly. We were just leaving. The officer nodded, then retreated. Back into the car. Engine revved. Gun. The officer watched until the street was empty. Then he turned to me. You're very bad at staying quiet, he said. I tried, I replied. They wouldn't let me. He studied my face. You're in danger, he said flatly. I know, I answered. And your husband, he asked. I swallowed. He won't stop, I said. Even now? He nodded slowly. Inside, he looked around the house again. This time not as an observer. As someone preparing. You should leave, he said. I shook my head. If I leave now? I replied. They win? He sighed. You're assuming this is about winning. What is it about then? I asked. Containment. The word settled in my chest. Before I could respond, his phone rang. He answered. Listened. Then his expression changed. Where? He asked. Another pause. He looked at me. They found something, he said. Something that changes the scope. My stomach tightened. Where? I asked. He hesitated. At your husband's office, he said. And it involves people you haven't mentioned yet. I closed my eyes briefly. Of course it did. Nothing about this had ever been just us. He turned toward the door. Get your bag, he said. We're not done. As we stepped outside, I felt it again. That pressure, that sense of being watched, from somewhere unseen, somewhere patient. I glanced down the street, nothing. But I knew. This wasn't a chase anymore. It was a waiting game. And someone else had just taken their turn. The office was already sealed when we arrived. Yellow tape, lights, too many people speaking in careful voices. This wasn't routine anymore. The officer stayed close to me as we walked past desks that still smelled like coffee and cologne. Normal life frozen. They had found a hidden server behind a false wall. Not just files, records, medical transactions, consent forms forged in shaky signatures, insurance payouts rotted through shell companies, names, so many names. Women like me, some who survived, some who didn't. This wasn't a husband trying to control a wife. It was a system built on quiet suffering. The officer handed me a chair and told me to sit. I didn't argue. I watched as people I'd never met realized one by one what they were standing inside. Hours passed. Then my husband arrived. Not in handcuffs yet. He walked in calmly, suit perfect, face composed. When he saw me, something in his expression finally cracked. Not fear, recognition, as if he was seeing the real me for the first time. This is unnecessary, he said to the room. His voice carried authority. Practice. We can discuss this privately, he added, looking at me. I stood. No, I said, can't. That single word shifted the room. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. You don't understand what you're doing. I understand exactly, I replied. You needed me weak, quiet, alive just enough. People stopped working, stopped typing, listening. This doesn't end well for you, he said, Carrot's eyes. It already has. The officer stepped between us. Sir, he said, you need to come with us? My husband smiled thinly. This is a mistake, he said. They cuffed him anyway. That was the moment control finally left his body. Not with a scream, with silence. News broke the next morning. Not whispers this time. Names, connections, arrests. The doctor was cleared, then praised. The woman in the white coat disappeared. So did several accounts. Too late, the evidence had already spread. I testified weeks later, not emotionally. Precisely, I described dinners, tea, symptoms, patterns. I watched jurors lean forward when I explained how slowly poison works when it's meant to train obedience, not cause death. My husband never looked at me again. Not during testimony, not during sentencing. He listened. That was enough. He received more years than he expected. Less mercy than he deserved. When the judge asked if I wished to speak, the room went still. I stood. I don't want revenge, I said. I wanted truth. I paused. That was all. I left the city 3 months later. Not because they told me to. Because I chose to. I changed my name, not to disappear but to breathe. Sometimes I still wake up at night, expecting to feel weak. I don't. What surprised me most wasn't surviving, it was this. The moment he lost control over my body, he lost control over everything. Revenge wasn't loud, it wasn't violent, it was patient, and it lasted longer than poison ever could.